Hi guys, welcome to the second part of our topic, localization in neurology. We are not robots. Okay. This time, let's proceed. We have mentioned earlier that the lesions can be either in the cerebrum, brainstem, down to the level of the muscle. But let's go deeper and know the signs and symptoms that will be referable to these different sections. Okay, hope you're still awake. When you talk about location of brain lesions, some would categorize it as either supratentorial versus infratentorial lesions. Okay? When we talk about this, we are actually referring to the tentorium cerebelli, that dura mater, okay, which is just above the cerebellum, roofing it, and then going across the brainstem. And thus, there you are. This is the dura mater. This is the tentorium cerebelli. Okay, there you are, the tentorium cerebelli. And now you have either a supratentorial lesion or an infratentorial lesion. So above the cerebral hemispheres, the diencephalon, basal ganglia, they're supratentorial in location, while the brainstem and the cerebellum is infratentorial in location. Another view, when it comes to herniation process, that falx cerebri is another dura mater dividing the left from the right hemisphere. There you are, that's our tentorium cerebelli. Okay, so supratentorial versus infratentorial. Now, when you do localization, definitely you have to make a good history taking and a good neuro exam. And just like in anything, we always say that if there's garbage in, that means you don't get the right history, you don't get to perform the right examination and interpret it properly, then you'll have garbage out, and probably you will not get the location or the localization of the lesion or the diagnosis. So here are some tips for localization. Number one, take note of all the symptoms and signs. Okay, gather them all. What are the pertinent neurological symptoms? What are your findings? Then for each, consider what system or pathway is or are implicated. A patient presenting with numbness on one side, then talk about the sensory pathway. A patient with double vision, look at the eye muscles, look at the nerves supplying the eyes. Okay, and for each, decide on the potential location. Okay, is the lesion inside the cerebral hemisphere or in the spinal cord, or outside, central or peripheral? Is it located in the frontal part of the brain on the left side when you have aphasia? So this is important. So if it's left or right, okay, and then having put all together the signs and symptoms, then you add them up. Okay, then ask where in the nervous system can each of these localization overlap. So if you have a corticospinal tract problem and then there's a weakness of the left arm, then you think, is the lesion in the spinal cord or in the cerebral hemisphere? Okay, there you are again, our different areas of the brain that can be affected. So let's start first with the cerebrum. This is the cerebrum. There you are. Cerebral hemisphere. Patients with cerebral problem can have altered mentations, memory problem, behavioral changes, language problem, definitely. Language problem. Apraxia means patient is unable to do something in the presence of intact motor function. The presence of seizures will tell you it's in the cerebrum, in the cerebral hemisphere. A unilateral sensory motor weakness involving the head and the limb, okay, same side. A visual field abnormalities. And of course, if the patient has movement disorder like dystonia, chorea, hemibalismus, then think of the cerebral involvement of the cerebral hemisphere. Why is it important to know the handedness of a patient with neurological disease? We ask that in our general data. Actually, we're more interested with the dominance of the brain, whether it's a left or right cerebral dominance. Okay. And the dominant lobe, okay, we say a patient has the left brain or the right brain is dominant lobe if this is involved with language. Handedness and hemispheric specialization for language. So we're talking here about language. So if you are a right-handed or among right-handed guys, 96% of them would have the left brain as the dominant brain. That's the language brain. However, for those who are left-handed, still 70% would still be left brain dominant. Okay. However, yes, 15% of them can have the dominant brain on the right hemisphere, and another 15% can have both sides being dominant. Here, we are showing you the left side of the brain, the dominant lobe for many of our patients. Okay, and there you are when you hear something. Okay, the auditory pathway would end in the superior temporal gyrus in the primary auditory cortex. Now this connects to the association area. That's the Wernicke's area. So there's where you understand. You try to recall what are the meaning of the words, what you've seen before associated with those words. Okay, and then this is connected. The primary auditory cortex and the Wernicke's areas, they're connected by a tract which is underneath the parietal and frontal there. Okay, this is called the Arcuates fasciculus. It connects it to the Broca's area, and Broca's area is the one responsible for us talking. Okay, that's the Broca's area. So I talk, that's Broca's area. I hear, primary auditory cortex. I understand, that's the Wernicke's area. Okay, I repeat. Okay, that goes into the Arcuates fasciculus. Now take note, there you are in the tip of the superior temporal sulcus is the angular gyrus, and that's responsible for naming. Okay, so patients with Broca's lesions in the Broca's area, like Broca's aphasia, can understand, okay, but they can have difficulty in communicating. On the other side, if you have a lesion in the Wernicke's area here, okay, the patient may be able to talk, but he may not be able to understand it well, so the patient would talk over and over again, or repeat it, or continuously trying to hide what he could not understand, so he keeps on talking. Okay? So there you are. Well, this is difficult now. Maybe for the seniors, this will be important if you want to classify the different types of aphasia. And this is based on asking for fluency. Is the patient fluent or not? Can the patient comprehend? Number 2. And number 3, can the patient repeat? Okay? Sometimes this is helpful in localizing. But as first year, probably this will not be important at this time. Now, some neurology pearls. So we'll be putting some neurology pearls. These are, again, are not 100% rules, but these are useful in a way because it helps you at least help you in your localization. Number 1, a patient with aphasia has a lesion involving the dominant lobe. So again, that would be the left brain among right-handed persons and even among left-handed guys. Okay, a right-handed patient presenting with acute left-sided weakness but also has aphasia, okay, then you have to check out for multifocal lesions like a right brain stroke, which would explain the weakness. But then, how could you explain the aphasia? This is a right-handed guy. So you would think that there's also a left brain lesion. Like you have to think about a multifocal lesions like an embolic stroke, wherein you can have emboli thrown on both sides of the hemisphere, left and right. And then number 3, you cannot check for aphasia if there is disturbance in sensorium, that if the patient is drowsy, delirious, okay, intoxicated, okay, you can't say they're aphasic because you have to have an intact sensorium in order to label a patient to have aphasia or not, or language function or not. As I said, it's a big topic on the dominance, the left brain and the right brain. We all say that the left brain, it's more logical, sequential, more rational, analytical, okay? They go into details. However, the right side of the brain, okay, it's more of intuitive, holistic. They look at it from afar. They get a good view of the whole thing before they, in analyzing. Okay, they're more subjective. Okay, they look at the whole, again, intuitive, okay, holistic. Okay, so that's the right brain. We have lots of drawing on this. This is nice too. Take note. The left-handed guys with the right brain dominant, they're more artistic. They have awareness for the arts. They're more creative. They have more insight, spatial orientation. Okay, that's a function of a right brain dominant guy. However, on the left side, it's more on language, number skills, written, reasoning. Okay, more analytical. Subukan nga po nating sabihin, si Pedro ay sumimba. Sabihin nyo nga po. Subukan natin nga. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Okay. Now, what is Gerstmann syndrome? Well, there you are. If you have presence of 4 of these, finger agnosia, agraphia, okay, left-right disorientation, acalculia, then think of a lesion involving the parietal lobe. Again, of the dominant lobe, again, which is usually the left. Okay, there you are. Take note, the angular gyrus, okay, or the deep superior temporal, the angular gyrus there, okay, that can produce a Gerstmann syndrome. So, if you get this, think it's on the left, it's on the dominant lobe. Nasaan ang kanang kamay? Nasaan ang kanang kamay? Aha. Hawakan nga po ng inyong kanang kamay ang kaliwang tenga. Nasaan po ang kaliwang tenga?
Kaliwa.
Aha. 100 minus 30. Pointing finger. Ito ro hawakan. Okay. Among patients with seizures, with other deficits, okay, look for lesions in the cortex or related subcortical structures like the thalamus. Okay, so what about the non-dominant lobe? What about the non-dominant lobe? Well, so what are the common manifestations of the non-dominant lobe, or, well, the right hemispheres, the right hemisphere syndromes? Well, there's neglect. Okay, you tend not to recognize the left side of the body. Anosognosia, you tend denial of illness. The patients would downgrade or or would not stress, would deny having weakness on the left side or having any illness at all. Visuospatial deficits, okay, that's important. Prosopagnosia is a condition wherein the patient cannot recognize the person, but he knows the face, but he does not know the person. He cannot put them all together and identify that particular person. Okay? And disorientation to direction and time. They mentioned that. So, some of the other characteristics, the patients have flat affect. They have difficulty in following directions. Okay? They have difficulty identifying relevant information. So, in conversations. Okay? Disorientation to time and space. Another feature of the non-dominant lobe would be sensory inattention. So, if you put 2 stimulus on both sides of the left and right hand, okay, he would be able to recognize if the stimulus is on the left, if the stimulus is on the right, but put them all together, the patient would not be able to recognize one side. Okay. Now, this is the cortical homunculus. We've seen this in the different figures. Take note, this is a distorted representation of the human body based on neurological map of the areas and proportion of the human brain dedicated to processing motor, and the other side is also sensory function for the different parts of the body. Take note that the hands are big, okay? So that there's a larger area in the cortex that subserves that of the function of the hands. Take note here, the legs and the knee, the feet, they're already in the medial part. And take note also of the lips and the tongues because of their wide representation. Another view. So there's the sensory cortex. Okay, they're different, but not so different. Okay, but here, okay, you'll have the homunculus on the posterior and on the parietal portion. That's a somatosensory cortex, and anterior to the Rolandic fissure, there you have the motor cortex, the representation there of the homunculus. Okay, another neurology pearl. Okay, sometimes they ask us, what is more devastating, a large lesion or a small lesion? Well, is it always correct that if you have a small lesion, then the patient would not be incapacitated? But take note here, if you look at the drawing here, this is your Mr. Homunculus here. Take note, all the fibers here, they all merge in the posterior limb of the internal capsule. So they're all there together. So therefore, a small lesion affecting this area would create dense plegia for the patient, dense contralateral hemiplegia. Note, because of the concentration of the fibers in this area. So the severity of deficit does not solely depend on the size of the lesion, but also on the site of the lesion. Here, if you have a lesion here, you may have a pure motor weakness. Patient is hemiplegic on the right side with intact sensation. Why? Because these are purely motor fibers here. Okay. The corticospinal tract meet together in the posterior limb of the internal capsule. This is the internal capsule again. There you are. So a small lesion affecting this area can cause dense hemiplegia.